Welcome and thank you for joining us today for a Land Services SA webinar on Textual Sheet, Other Titles Affected. This is a pre-recorded session with a live Q&A session at the end of this presentation. We ask that you kindly hold all of your questions until the allocated time, where one of our subject matter experts will be able to assist. Land Services SA is committed to providing an excellent customer experience. One way we continue to deliver value to the industry is through our industry education program, where we produce a range of helpful educational materials, hold regular webinars, and host industry events. Our industry education program addresses key topics or frequently asked questions to ensure you remain up to date with contemporary practices. We want to help set you up for success and believe helping with industry education will help reduce the volume of requisitions, meaning a quicker and more seamless experience for your clients. Land Services SA's subject matter experts assist in delivering our industry education program, utilising their years of experience and respected place in the industry. This webinar was prepared by Steve Andrews, a senior plan examiner with over 40 years experience. Steve was involved with the creation of both the new textual diagram sheet plan format and the plan presentation guidelines. This session will be covering what are other titles affected, when are other titles affected shown, and how do I find other titles affected. And we will run through a few case studies. This is a copy of a textual sheet of a plan, and highlighted is the Other Titles Affected panel. This is not to be confused with the Other heading shown in the subject title details, as the Other heading relates to instruments representing ownership of land other than a certificate of title, Crown lease, or Crown record. A bit of history behind the other titles affected. Before the A3 plan format, surveyors would search for the other titles affected, but it was never captured on the plan. Conveyancers would then also search for other titles affected, as they needed the title reference to prepare their documents correctly. It made sense to capture these title references on the plan, and hence the Other Titles Affected panel was created. When the other titles affected is incorrect or missing, it can affect the land description, mode of issue, fees, and consents. There have been occasions in the past where the incorrect title has been shown in the Other Titles Affected panel, and the conveyancer has sought consents for the title not only from the owner, but also from their bank, and the bank has charged for these consent. It is therefore essential to show the correct information in other titles affected, and by showing the correct information, it can significantly improve the plan deposit process by avoiding unnecessary delays, requisitions, and costs. The other titles affected is shown for land outside the bold black lines that is affected by the outcome of the plan, where there is an easement in gross title that is affected by the outcome of the plan, where there are parcels affected by an amendment or an encroachment by a community plan, and where there is an extinguishment of an easement under the Roads Opening and Closing Act 1991. Other titles affected is captured when you are creating, varying, or fully extinguishing easements where the dominant land is not shown on the plan. The dominant land may not be delineated on a plan if the dominant land is not contiguous. An example of this is the old Channel 10 site at Gilberton. They originally created an easement to use the radio towers at Mount Lofty. The dominant land was not shown on the plan as it was not contiguous. Other titles affected is also shown in a community plan or an amendment to a community plan where the dominant land isn't part of the community parcels as the dominant land is in a different title system. In the example shown, easement A has been created in favour of allotment 111 in D57852. As the dominant land is under the Real Property Act and the servient land is under the Community Titles Act, the dominant land cannot be shown on the plan and the title for allotment 111 in D57852 must be shown in the other titles affected panel. The easement note below the diagram will show the creation of the new easement A over lot 1. The other titles affected must be shown for land outside the bold black lines when an easement is created, buried or fully extinguished, but not when it is partially extinguished. If you are the servient owner of an easement, and there are 5 titles with a dominant easement over your land, and one decides to extinguish their easement, the servient owner does not need to consent, and therefore their title does not need to go in the other titles affected. It will only go in other titles affected if all 5 extinguish their easements. Where an easement that was created to a body that can hold an easement in gross is being buried or extinguished, the easement in gross title must be searched and shown in the other titles affected panel. Where the creation dealing is available to view on SALIS, you can search for this dealing using the Dealing Details search to get the affected title reference. If the title described in the creation dealing is now cancelled, use the child parent search in SALIS to identify the current title. Hot tip. The bodies that can hold an easement in gross are listed in section 5.55 of the Plan Presentation Guidelines and are in accordance with section 41A of the Law and Property Act 1936. Where the creation dealing is not available to view on SALIS, the dealing will have to be ordered from our records storage facility using the miscellaneous search in SALIS. When the dealing has been retrieved, the title reference can be identified from the dealing, then search for the current title using the child parent search. Where there is an amendment to a community plan, changing internal or external boundaries, creating, burying or extinguishing easements in conjunction with internal or external boundary changes, or when there are changes to the service infrastructure, the title references for the affected land must be shown in the Other Titles Affected panel, as consents are required from these owners. The Other Titles Affected is required to be shown where there is an encroachment from a community plan over private land or land vested as a road. You can use the SAPA website to find the title of the private land that the encroachment is over. It can be harder to find the title for the road, as SAPA will not show these title references. It is worth noting that government roads do not have a title reference. However, check SAPA for other community plans along the road to see if they have an encroachment as they will show the road title in their other titles affected panel. Otherwise, an historical search back through the plans to find the plan where the road was originally created will be required. Hot tip. If the title for an encroachment of a community or community strata plan is incorrect or not shown in the other titles affected panel, new planning consents will be required. For any pre-existing easements and rights of way over opened or closed roads and are extinguished in accordance with the Roads Opening and Closing Act 1991, a note is not required to be shown on the plan, but a right search must be conducted for any additional certificates of title affected by the extinguishment of easements and rights of way, as they must be shown in the other titles affected panel. In this first case study, allotment 7 has an existing easement over the land marked A. A is in allotment 11 in deposited plan 58796. The new allotments 1 and 2 being created in this plan do not require an easement over A. A right search has found that no other titles have an easement over A, and therefore the title for allotment 11 in D58796 will be shown in the other titles affected panel, as this is a full extinguishment of easement A. An example of extinguishment easement note is shown below the diagram. In this case study, allotment 7 still has an existing easement over the land marked A. Allotment 2 does not require the easement. Allotment 1 is to retain the easement. As this is a partial extinguishment of the easement, no title is shown in the other titles affected panel. As you can see in the easement notes below the diagram, there is an extinguishment of easement A for allotment 2, and allotment 1 retains the existing easement. In this case study, allotment 7 has an existing easement over A. New allotments 1 and 2 do not require an easement over A. A right search has found that there is another title that has an easement over A. As this is a partial extinguishment of the easement, no title is shown in the other titles affected panel, and the division plan will not show easement A on the plan. As you can see in the easement note below in the diagram, there is a full extinguishment of easement A over allotment 7. In this case study, allotments 1 and 7 are to be amalgamated to form allotment 5. In option 1, only allotment 1 has an easement over the land marked A, and allotment 1 is to retain that easement over A, so an appurtenance is created for allotment 5 marked X, having an easement over A. Therefore, no title is shown in the other titles affected panel. The easement note below in the diagram shows that allotment 5 marked X has an existing easement over A. In this example, where the land is being amalgamated, the whole of the land requires easement A. The easement will be varied so that the whole of allotment 5 will have an easement over A. The title for allotment 11 in deposited plan 58796 must be shown in the other titles affected panel. As the owner of allotment 11 in deposited plan 58796 must consent to the dominant land increasing in size. The easement note shown below the diagram will show a variation note where the in favour column has increased from allotment 1 in D58796 to the whole of allotment 5 in this plan. In this case study, easement A originally was over both allotment 50 and 51. Allotment 51 is to be vested as road and does not require easement A. However, allotment 26 in deposited plan 59963 has a dominant easement over all of A. Therefore, the title for allotment 26 in deposited plan 59963 must be shown in the other titles affected panel. The extinguished note below the diagram shows allotment 26 in deposited plan 59963 is described in the in favour of panel, and they are extinguishing their easement over allotment 1, being Adelaide Road. The easement over allotment 50 is carried forward. The last case study relates to where the internal boundaries are being changed. Only allotment 107 has an easement over land marked A, and this is reduced to only affecting allotment 2. As this panel is a partial extinguishment of the easement, no title is shown in the other titles affected panel. The easement note below the diagram shows how the notes are to be shown. The in favour of for the extinguished note must accurately depict the extinguishment. This is shown as allotment 107 in D45689, now contained in allotment 1. The next note shows allotment 2 has an easement over A. In summary, the main takeaways from this session are: if the other titles affected is incorrect, the land division application will have incorrect land description, mode of issue, fees and consents. Other titles affected is shown when creating, varying or extinguishing easements where the dominant land is not contiguous. When an easement is partially extinguished, other titles affected is not shown for land outside the bold black line. Other titles affected is shown for an amendment or encroachment of a community plan. Where the title for an encroachment of a community plan is incorrect, new planning consents will be required. Land Services SA's website has a range of educational and support materials to assist you in your day-to-day work. Our Industry Education Hub is a good place to start. This can be found by clicking Industry Education Hub on the homepage of LSSA's website. A copy of today's webinar will be published on the Industry Education Hub together with recording of previously held webinars. That concludes the recorded webinar section. Thank you for listening. Please remain online for the live Q&A session with our subject matter experts.